great amounts of money that can be used for other purposes. For example, the money saved by using less or by recycling raw materials could be used on efforts to improve product quality, which is of long-term benefit to the organization. Of course, in order for such a program to succeed, the organization must have complete cooperation from the management. Managers must be familiar with the technical means to reduce waste. They must examine waste reduction opportunities, reward waste reduction efforts, realize economic values of waste reduction, see the cost of long-term liability. The organization goals should include recycling potential waste, improving plant operations, substituting raw materials, and the redesign of end products. But these efforts do not stop at our places of business. We must look at our home life also and how today's convenience lifestyle is affecting our health and the environment we live in. Ironically, the chemicals that we use to protect ourselves are actually harming us. Cleaning, disinfecting, and repellent or eradicating agent can be very toxic or even fatal. One should use care when handling such chemicals and should not, under any circumstances, combine them. For example, ammonia mixed with chlorine will form chloramine gas, which is deadly. When possible, it's advisable to use mild soap solutions for cleaning, as they are much less toxic and far more biodegradable. The toilet or the sinks should not be used for disposal of medications or other chemicals, as they may end up in our water supply. Aside from recycling of paper and packaging materials, which has already been mentioned, residential cleanup should include separation of toxic household products, including paint, varnish, insecticides, and pesticides from other items. We should start the cleanup effort at home. Out of the home, we are improving. We have developed excellent remedial situations like the site remediation process. We have developed excellent technologies. Many organizations are keeping up with the latest environmental regulations and are trying to control the seepage of waste into our drinking water. We are making an effort to prevent waste from evaporating into the air we breathe. But then we go back and ask the question, do we or are we having the capability of further improving? Then comes the legal aspect of it. Does the contractor who is contaminating have enough insurance if the remediation effect fails to cover the claims of people who live around the site? Or would we do a risk assessment at every intermediate stage of the site remediation process? How in-depth, how large, how economical is it going to be? Do we have the money? If we do have the money, will it be enough to save that site or bring it back to life? Is doing so practical? Concerning site remediation again in India, I have had a chance to look at some of the World Bank assisted site remediation sites. They were green. The entire area looked beautiful and green. The only thing is nothing grew on it. Thousands and thousands of acres were contaminated with chromium and chromium salts. In developing countries such as India, we do not know how we are going to clean up, nor how nature is going to respond. There have already been a lot of cases of human exposure to contaminants in these areas. But there is some good news. Many innovative technologies are now in place, especially where cleaning and reclaiming water, especially wastewater and other solid materials. Recycled water is utilized for usage on farms, along roads to grow shrubbery, and in some cases where more money is being spent, water is being fully purified into drinking water. What if wastewater is so highly contaminated with organic solvents that it becomes just impossible to recycle. Can we use that water for other purposes? The innovative technologies answer is yes. Here we see a company that has developed a way to recycle waste paper using the wastewater that carries it. Further along in the process, the water itself is reclaimed. This technology, of course, spares us from tapping our water reserves and from cutting more trees for paper. If these cost-effective technologies are encouraged, we may be on the right track. We may succeed in improving our standard of living and at the same time feel happy that we are doing our share to conserve this environment. We are now doing the best that we can with the wastewater situation through the use of technologies such as filtration, sedimentation, sludge formation, and aeration. We are utilizing microbes more and more, not only in soil, but to clean water as well. We are teaching microbes to use industrial waste as food. This technology has been around for the last 20 years. Using microbes has been with us for centuries from the day we learned to use them to convert simple starches into wine and beer, and to soften our breads and quicken our fermentation processes. Now we use them in this new way. Here we see microbes being used to break down various types of chemicals from DDT. This technology can be used with ordinary petrochemicals to sulfurated chemicals, and even can be used to disassociate and utilize metals. These microbe technology may be one of the keys that we hold for the future. But we still have to remember, charity begins at home. We have to start cleaning up right where we live. We should start not at remediation sites, but from municipal dump sites. We bring waste here and hope it will go away. But we have problems here too, because most of the chemicals from our homes have been thrown right into the municipal waste dump with all our garbage in it. The food products that we put in our garbage bags decompose very fast. But would you believe the plastic garbage bag that we throw away will stay there unbroken, unused, unutilized, and non-degraded for the next 400 years? Can you imagine your great-great-grandsons and granddaughters digging up these plastic bags that refuse to degrade? This is where I believe microbial technology will help us. Microbial technology will permit us to recycle our waste naturally. Now, let's look at some examples of what industries are doing to prevent pollution. In the words of Mr. Din Butel of Chrysler Corporation, hazardous releases should be eliminated at the source rather than using end-of-pipe controls. This allows industries to get out in front of environmental issues as opposed to chasing them. Last year, the company gutted the 41-year-old assembly plant and installed the latest manufacturing process and systems, including 278 robots. They now use waterborne paint systems, powder chip processes, and paint finishes, which have reduced emissions by 60%. Industries should take this example to heart in order to help reduce pollution and contamination. We can prevent the pollution of water, air, and the soil. We can prevent unnecessary chemical exposures, and we can cut hospital bills down by hundreds of millions of dollars. We have already conquered most infectious and communicable diseases, but we are lagging behind in controlling man-made diseases. We have to wake up to this reality and act. We now have more problems. The incidence of sick building syndrome is growing not only among businesses but in our homes. This is due to organic chemicals, including insecticides, fumigants, and natural contaminants like fungus and fungal spores. We had better start cleaning up, beginning with our homes. We can go back to the beautiful world that we always pictured in our minds. We have to remember that we did not inherit this world from our ancestors, but rather we have borrowed it from our children. So we should keep in mind when we try to create prosperity for ourselves that our planet Earth and its conservation should be given first priority. In that way, who knows, we may be able to correct the difficulties that we have so far created with waste chemicals and other contaminants.
Let's begin the first question and answer session. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. Therefore, we ask that only one question be asked per phone call and that these questions be as brief as possible. You may call the studio directly at the phone numbers or fax numbers which now appear on your screen. We do have a fax in from Instituto Tecnológico de Colima in Mexico. And the question is for you gentlemen, besides cutting down on the use of paper, what else have large universities done in the area of waste management?
Large universities, even medium-sized universities now, including our own, have computerized most of the systems, like registration, examinations, results, and giveaway papers. We are now putting them right on monitors and on screens. And even taking examinations are now being done on computers, thus minimizing waste of paper.
Thank you. We now have a live phone call from Cimentos Apasco in the state of Tabasco in Mexico. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. Thank you. We have two questions. The first question is, how safe is the final incineration by incinerating biphenyl polychlorinated with a temperature over 1200 Celsius degrees? And the second question is, what is the proportion of recycling of the wastes in Mexico?
I'll take the first question now. When we are incinerating, especially in an incinerator that what we call now the circulating bed chamber incinerators, 1300 degrees usually is not enough. We have seen quite a lot of products that come out of it and we are unable to control it. But if the temperature can be reduced and go through a multi-chamber incinerator, then we will be able to reduce quite a lot of incineration waste, especially the arsenic oxides that are coming out, and quite a lot of carbon monoxide, and also the cyanides that are coming out can be broken down. And your second question concerning Mexico, I've noticed a similarity, a pattern in Southeast Asia. We do have problems. Now we have started collections of waste. Like Mexico, in India I noticed most of the products are taken out first, like tin cans and steel cans, plastics, all are taken out, and then the municipal waste as it is, without the material and plastics products, are being used for producing fuel. If we can utilize that technology, as we have done in the United States, especially in Iowa State University, which was the first to introduce that, we should be able to do better in Mexico to control waste.
Thank you, Mr. Chalam. We have now another fax from Finalco in Santa Fe de Bogota, Medellin, Colombia, and it has to do with the Exxon Valdez disaster. What types of changes or regulations have been imposed on companies in the oil industry since that disaster?
There's quite a few regulations, the importance of which is the transportation, where double-hulled ships have to be utilized and single-hull ships have in fact banned from transporting oil. The next is the spillage is being controlled and monitored within the ship holds before they can leak out. Third, while transferring, we are also monitoring the prevention of spillage. And as the oil industry is concerned, the refining process has to be far more being monitored now than previously, especially in control with toxic fumes like benzene and octane fumes that are spilling into the atmosphere.
Very good.
You know, I think it's also interesting to note that as there's a pattern in this country that after the Exxon Valdez accident, you saw both federal legislation and state legislation specifically dealing with oil spills in a very reactive, very quickly reactive mode.
Yes.
So now we have new sanctions throughout the country.
Yes, quite true. We have a live phone call now from Comisión Federal de Electricidad in Mexico. Go ahead, please.
No tenemos pregunta. We don't have a question.
Oh, we don't have a question after all. Well,
Oh, okay.
if you wish to call in with a question, we will be happy to receive it. Let me go now to another facts that we have from Instituto Tecnológico de Mitatitlán, Mexico, and that is what percentage of companies in the United States are stepping up their waste management efforts, and what are some of the main reasons that they're doing so?
The regulations that have come in have demanded that 100% of the companies follow up with their waste management. With the latest law, like the RCRA, we call it the cradle-to-grave law, they are responsible for every ounce of waste that they are producing until it's properly disposed of. As such, we find that companies are becoming more and more conscious of controlling their waste products.
I think historically we really saw the larger companies reacting first because they were more sensitive to some of the problems. But now, as Dr. Chalam notes, it's spreading throughout the business culture in the United States clearly. Even the very small companies now, there's seminars available on how to control and minimize the waste stream. EPA has what they call a common sense initiative. It's clearly a growing culture.
We have another phone call now from Instituto Politécnico Nacional in Tijuana, Baja California. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. The question is the following. I have several, but I'm just going to give you one question. How much toxic waste has been reduced when you use solar power, and can you increase solar power use?
Solar power actually is one of the fantastic technologies that have come into our lives. In fact, the waste has been minimized by more than 90%. And it is being further used also in reducing waste. And especially if we do not use solar power, especially in power generating plants, we end up with not only mineral waste, but also quite a lot of organic waste. As such, more and more people are becoming aware of solar power, including utilizing of solar power in their homes for both even air conditioning and heating purposes.
Thank you. We have another live phone call now from Universidad Tecnológica de Panama. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. How have you been able to, how have you achieved that presidents and ministers realize that they have a good approach to administrating and managing natural resources and not treat that as waste that they're just managing?
We have an education problem posed for us here in terms of our elected officials.
Yes, especially elected officials right now, both presidents and prime ministers throughout the world, they are becoming to notice that reducing the waste in their countries is actually benefiting them. And they are able to bring in more economical benefits by doing it. We have noticed it especially like in Thailand, where beautiful island resorts are now attempting to recycle waste, right from picking up tin cans and paper products and plastic bottles right from the seashores. And in this way, they are attracting more tourists to visit those places where the air is cleaner, the water is purer, and living conditions are better.
Mr. Opper, as a former government official, what would you say about this question?
Well, one of the things that I think has really helped educate government leaders, business leaders, has been what we call the explosive growth of the non-governmental organizations. I think the NGOs are acting like watchdogs, certainly throughout the world, and we see that really increasing in Latin America especially, where other groups who are strong citizen advocates are making sure that their governments are listening to what they have to say. And politicians everywhere listen to their citizens. So the more active that we get the NGOs, the more we see governments starting to respond.
So it's a positive sign.
I think it is generally positive.
Very good, very good. We have now another live phone call from Universidad Nacional de Córdoba. Go ahead, please. Good morning.
Good morning. The question that we would like to ask is, what can we do with the bacteria and then with all the nuclear wastes?
Bacteria and nuclear waste.
Yes, here it's a little bit of a complex question. When we talk about bacterial utilization to reduce waste, it is good. But we have to make sure the bacteria itself does not become harmful to us in the future. And most of the infectious type of bacteria in infectious waste are now being neutralized before they're being sent out or to be incinerated. And one question about nuclear waste so far that we have is just to reduce it, and in case we have it, we are trying to dilute it. Like in the case of the United States, we are trying to dilute it as much as we can before we send it for burial, especially to our Nevada test sites. And I believe in quite a number of the Latin American countries and in Asia, especially in China and in India, we are following the same pattern.
Thank you. Now we have another phone call from Key TV Comunicaciones in Rio de Janeiro. Go ahead, please.
I would like to know how the industrial companies, what are they doing regarding their water usage? And since all of these, the recycling of water and water management, wastewater management, it entails a lot of investment, and how they handle that in the United States.
Water actually needs a little bit of investment, I agree. But also utilization of water, in the first part it is being reduced. So the recyclable water that will come later will also be reduced, and the wastewater in turn gets reduced. Here we are trying to use water not only for cultivation, but also for irrigation, and also reuse to clean our own products that we started with. But if you are interested in using water for drinking, then it becomes a very costly affair, because the cleaning up process is going to remain expensive for some time.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that we also see not only the increasing use of recycling, but the increasing use of pre-treatment programs, I think, throughout the world. So that now the water that's being discharged, that water which you can't eliminate and that you do discharge, we're seeing governments regularly requiring it being pre-treated before it goes into the municipal systems.
Yeah, in addition to that, there's also secondary treatment of water before it's being sent out.
Exactly. Thank you. We now have another phone call from Comisión Federal de Electricidad in Mexico. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. What are the most important problems in this area for power plants, and what do you think is the best solution?
Okay, most of the power plants, let's start right from the wiring that we have. We do quite a lot of organic chemicals, especially polychlorinated biphenyls. The PCBs are being used. And we are using quite a lot of chromium on our lampposts. And we are also using quite a lot of other products, the phenolic compounds, to preserve our wood products for a very, very long time. All these tend to leach into our environment. In the United States now, what we are doing, and in other developed countries, we are going into plasticizers where they cannot leach out. And we make the plasticizers in such a way they stay there for a long time, and we do not have to treat them at all. And in addition to that, we also make sure the wiring systems that we are using are foolproof. I mean foolproof in the sense, in case there is a fire, it does not actually catch fire and produce fumes like cyanide. So technology is growing in it, and I believe it is still growing and will catch up in most of the world.
Okay. Another phone call now from Instituto Tecnológico de Apatzingán in Mexico. Go ahead, please, and good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Our question is the following. What are the consequences of the spill of sulfuric acid in the environment, for example, on Earth, on the soil?
That's a very interesting question, because I've noticed it not only in the United States. We had a similar problem in Malaysia, another similar problem in India, another similar problem in Bangkok, in Thailand. The question, when sulfuric acid is poured into the soil, the first thing is it is going to act with the water molecules in the soil, thus producing heat. And this heat will destroy the surrounding. And in addition to that, this heat will break down the sulfuric acid to produce sulfur dioxide and another gas, sulfur trioxide, which in turn will go into the atmosphere and bring about acid rain, killing all our fish. So the best way to treat this type of a spill is to neutralize it. And the best way to neutralize it is using lime at very low levels and in a controlled way, so that it can be disposed of as ordinary, simple salt like calcium sulfate.
Okay, now another question from Universidad Tecnológica de Panamá. Go ahead, please.
This is a question from Panama, from the Technological University, in one of the regional centers. The question is the following. What recycling process, different from incineration, could we apply to wastes of hospitals in our countries, where we don't have the economical, financial resources enough to be able to have a costly equipment that would not generate as much waste as the ones we have? Thank you.
The best way, as you know and I know, that has been used for a long time in most of the hospitals, is thermal neutralization. In other words, under high pressure, if steam can be used, we will kill most of the bacteria and disassemble the virus particles as they form. And that is a very recommended step. Only when that fails, then we go for incineration. But in the case of tissues, we can also do the thermal destruction first before burial into the ground. That way, we will be able to get rid of it. Now, the third way is to use specific chemicals like lye, like sodium hydroxide or calcium hydroxide, especially in cases of very dangerous bacteria like botulism, like tetanus, to destroy them first, because we cannot fully and completely rely on incineration, because the spores, there is a possibility that they can escape into the atmosphere. So your question is very interesting, and I believe the best way we would is to go through thermal neutralization.
We have another phone call now from Comisión Federal de Electricidad in CECOP in Mexico. Go ahead, please. Good morning.
Buenos días. In what is the proportion, who bears the most responsibility in the different sectors of the society to really guard the environment and preserve the environment? Government, family, industries, what do you think bears the most responsibility?
Now we have a non-technical question here that is probably very difficult to answer. Mr. Opper, do you want to try your answer?
Well, certainly it depends on the way different societies are structured, but the approach that's been taken in many countries is that the polluter bears the responsibility. The one creating the waste stream bears responsibility for its ultimate disposal and its correct handling. And that includes both families and residences, because there's waste stream produced there. It includes businesses, because there's waste stream produced there, schools and universities, or government. But the focus, if you make the focus for controlling and properly disposing of waste upon that entity which is creating it, that's shown to be a very efficient and economical approach to creating the proper incentives for making sure waste is handled properly.
Dr. Chalam?
The government can bring in as many regulations as possible, but if we are conscious of the waste that we are creating, I would rather say it starts with us, the first person, the individual, the home. If we can start controlling the waste from there, automatically the businesses will too, and regulations can be used for that. But in spite of all regulations, I believe the waste control has to be started from the home.
Very good. So we all have responsibility. We now have a live question from Rainbird organization in Tijuana. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Tenemos. First question, what would happen if we don't have inadequate recycling on a global level? Or do you have any projections about that? What would happen? And then the second question is, how can we actually motivate and make people aware, particularly in this underdeveloped world, that they must recycle?
What will happen will be buried